국내 언론에서 전하지 않는 뉴스, 지금 이 순간 폭스뉴스를 통해 확인하실 수 있습니다.
General Keith Kellogg is a former Trump special envoy and co-chair of American Security at the America First Policy Institute, and he joins me now. General, welcome to the show. Look, this is an important time to have you on. We know that tensions are high, and you have both sides, the U.S. and Iran, in these talks saying they have lines that they will not cross. So how do we get closer to finally bringing an end to this conflict once and for all?
What the president has done is just totally demolish their military. Their fleet is at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. Their enriched uranium is gone. And everything about them is driven us to this negotiation period where we have a good negotiations team on the ground. They brought one forward. What I would say, though, when you look at this negotiation that's happening today, the one guy from the Iranian side I'd watch out for is Arachi. He's their foreign minister. He actually wrote a book on negotiation called The Power of Negotiation. His parents were rug merchants. And it's sort of like you or I walking into a store and try to buy something and there was no price tag on it. So it's all haggling. But I think that we are coming in with all the cards. We know what we want. We want to open right now the Strait of Hormuz. We can do that. You either do it voluntarily or we're going to make you open it. And that's where you want to be at. So the current state is, I think we all ought to sit back and watch these negotiations play out. I would advise the Iranians, be very careful. History has not shown this to go well for any party that's fought back on the negotiations. They should realize they don't hold any of the cards. We can make sure that we destroy their economic potential as well. Just let us figure this out, how to open up the Strait of Hormuz. We can do it if we have to militarily. And I think that's where Vice President Vance is going to go.
Their guy wrote a book on negotiations. Our guy wrote a book on negotiations, like you just said, the art of the deal. And we know that for sure.
Right.
Now, look, General, there is this ceasefire with Iran, and we have that going for us. But there's still a lot of activity. There's strikes back and forth between Israel and Lebanon, and talks were scheduled between those two nations this week in Washington. But the Lebanese prime minister now says he's going to postpone his upcoming trip. So how do you see that potentially impacting these peace talks, or maybe even our alliance with Israel, considering Iran has maintained that Lebanon is included in the ceasefire and the U.S. says they're not?
Yeah, I would disassociate the two. Don't bring them both together. Because of Hezbollah, which is based out of Lebanon, the United Nations actually put in UNIFIL in there. They actually made sure that south of the Litani River, that they would control it. They haven't done that. The UN has just absolutely failed on making sure that the Hezbollah has not been south of the Litani. And I think the Israelis have to fight for their own survival, and they have to fight against Hezbollah. That's where they're at up there. So we kind of need to disassociate Lebanon from what's happening with Iran. So I would kind of say to the Lebanese and to the Iranians and the Israelis, this is yours to figure out. It's separate from what we're doing in Iran as well. They have to keep making sure that their people are safe in Israel, and they're going to do that. So you kind of, this is where I'm talking about negotiations. They're going to try to muddy the water, meaning the Iranians are. They're kind of going to throw things in there. Arachi's good at that. And we have to be very careful about that. Remember in The Art of the Deal, which I thought was one of the great lines, that the President of the United States, when he wrote that book, one of the articles he wrote in there, be ready to walk away from a bad deal. He'll do that. He'll look at the Iranians and say, thank you very much. We're not going to do it. We're out of there.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. He's not going to give up anything that he feels is necessary for this deal. And you say the UN hasn't done their job. Another group who doesn't feel like they've done their job is our NATO allies. There's no secret to anybody that the president's been very disappointed with our NATO allies. He's been very open about that. Now, this week, you saw the NATO Secretary General in D.C.
Right.
It sounds like even he understands the president's frustration with what's gone on with our allies. Do you think, though, General, we're going to start to see our European allies finally decide it's time to pull their weight here?
Look, we need to tell NATO that we are going to have a new NATO, whatever you want to call it. You know, it started with 12 members in 1949. Now it's 32. There is an article in the treaty, it's Article 13, that it says you can give NATO 1 year and we'll pull out of NATO. We should basically say we're going to have a new NATO. This is not working at all. Secretary General Ruda understands that. I think he understands the frustration the president has. Look, it's a defensive alliance. We've asked them to pull their own weight. When we go through the Strait of Hormuz, a lot of that stuff goes to Europe. A lot of it goes to the Pacific. This is time when we ought to have a Pacific and a European relationship, a peace organization, a defensive organization, well into the future. So I think the president has really rise to this. He's smart. He's very blunt with him. I think there's kind of smarting under his direct involvement with it, but he's correct on what he's doing. And God bless him. Thank you for what you're doing, representing the American people, and he's serious about it. So everything he's done, he's played by his instincts, and you know your father-in-law really well. His instincts are really, really good. They're really honed well, and he's going to hit, and he's going to make sure he understands where he's going to play.
Yeah. Well, now let me ask you about this. You know, speaking of the Strait, we did see in the Strait of Hormuz today that there was some mine clearing going on, which seems to be a step in the right direction, General. Do you feel like this is just that, a step in the right direction, maybe the beginning of the end of this conflict over there?
Well, I hope it is. I mean, the mine clearing, it's just to make sure that they don't do it, and also the missile systems they've got on base. In other words, they're shore-to-ship missile systems. We have to make sure, because they've actually changed the route of egress and access into the Gulf out there. They've put it by their islands more closer to Iran. In other words, the one island that you watch for in there is not Geisham Island, that's the big one, but Little Lanark Island, that's their command and control hub that you need to watch out for. And I would just tell them up front, this is the way it's going to be. So I think it's a good sign, a positive sign, but part of that is the best one is if the Iranians help us to get through the strait and make sure. Either do it jointly or we'll do it by ourselves, one of the two.
Well, we seem to be doing a lot by ourselves these days. There's no doubt about that. General Keith Kellogg, we appreciate you as always. Thank you so much.